Alex had never imagined his life would lead him here, standing before the most powerful alien queen in the galaxy. He had spent years exploring the stars, never expecting to find himself in the heart of an alien empire, facing the ruler herself. But now, here he was, in the grand hall of Zorathra, the alien queen. She stood tall, her presence overwhelming. Her eyes, cold and calculating, met his, but there was something different today. Instead of the usual authority in her gaze, there was something softer, something Alex couldn't quite place. The tension in the air was thick, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change forever. Human, Zorathra spoke, her voice calm, but with a weight that made Alex's heart skip a beat. There is something I must tell you, something that will change everything. Alex's mind raced. What could she possibly want to tell him? He'd already been pulled into this alien world, caught up in her complicated plans, but this felt different. His palms began to sweat as he waited for her to continue. "You may find this hard to believe," she said, stepping closer, her gaze never leaving his. "But I am carrying your child." The words hit Alex like a physical blow. He staggered back, his mind struggling to process what she had just said. A child. His child. How could this be possible? He barely knew the queen, let alone have a relationship with her. The shock on his face must have been clear, because Zorathra didn't wait for him to gather his thoughts before continuing. "This child," she continued, her tone more serious than ever, "will rewrite the future. Our child will change everything, human." Alex felt the weight of her words like a heavy stone on his chest. The room seemed to close in around him as the reality of her statement sank in. What did she mean by that? How could a child, his child, hold the power to change the future? And why was she telling him now? Zorathra's expression softened, but only for a moment. "This is not a curse," she added, almost as if reading his mind. "It is a gift, and a responsibility that we must share. The fate of countless worlds depends on what we do next." Alex's mind spun. He had no idea what to make of this, but one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. The future, his future, was no longer in his hands alone. It was in the hands of the alien queen and the child they would create together. The weight of Zorathra's words hung heavy in the air. Alex stood there, his mind racing, trying to process what she had just revealed. A child, their child, could change the fate of the universe, but how? Why? He couldn't understand what was so special about their union. Zorathra noticed his confusion and stepped closer. Her eyes, usually cold and detached, seemed to hold a deeper emotion now, something almost vulnerable. "I know this is hard to believe," she began, her voice quieter, more serious than ever. "But there are forces at play that neither of us can control. My people, they've been cursed, bound to an endless cycle of conflict and destruction. This child is our only hope." Alex blinked, trying to make sense of her words. "What do you mean, cursed?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zorathra took a deep breath, her gaze shifting to the distant stars beyond the palace's tall windows. "For generations, my family has been cursed by an ancient power, one that holds my people in a constant state of war. No matter what we do, no matter how many battles we win or lose, we can never escape the bloodshed. This curse has bound my people to a fate of endless struggle, and no one has been able to break it. Until now." She turned back to Alex, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. "Our child, Alex, is the key. The curse can only be broken if someone with the strength of both human and alien blood is born. The child we are creating together has the power to unite our worlds, or destroy them." Alex felt his chest tighten. The stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't just about surviving this strange world or trying to find a way back home. He was now part of something much larger, something far more dangerous. "And what if we fail?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Zorathra's expression darkened. "If we fail, Alex, My people will be lost forever. The curse will continue, and the galaxy will descend into chaos. She stepped back, letting the weight of her words sink in. Alex felt a strange mix of fear and responsibility. He had never asked for any of this. He was just a human, a small part of a much bigger picture. And yet, here he was, standing at the center of a fate that could affect the entire galaxy. "I didn't ask for this," Alex said, his voice barely a whisper. Zorathar's eyes softened, but her resolve remained firm. "Neither of us did. But now, we have no choice. Our child will change the course of history, whether we're ready or not." The tension in the room grew, the gravity of their situation undeniable. There was no turning back now. Alex had to decide whether he would accept this new reality, this bond with an alien queen, and take on the responsibility of bringing a child into a galaxy on the brink of destruction. As the silence stretched on, Alex's heart pounded in his chest. This was just the beginning, and the future seemed more uncertain than ever. Would their child be the savior the galaxy needed, or would their bond lead them down a path they couldn't escape? One thing was clear: Alex's life would never be the same again. Days passed since Zorathar's revelation, and the weight of her words continued to press down on Alex. He had been pulled into a galaxy-changing plot, but he still didn't fully understand the extent of it. Every moment spent in her presence was a reminder that his life had been irrevocably altered. Zorathar had given him little time to process everything. She had been busy preparing for what she called the Trial of Unity, a mysterious ceremony that would bind their fates together in a way no one could reverse. She had explained that the child they were going to have wasn't just a symbol of their union. It was a key to unlocking peace between their worlds. But Alex had his doubts. He sat in his quarters, staring out at the sprawling city below. The alien world was beautiful, full of shining towers, and strange, floating vehicles that zipped through the air. But the beauty of it all felt distant, unimportant. His mind kept drifting back to Zorathar's words. "Our child will rewrite the future." He didn't feel ready. How could he? He was just a human, thrown into the middle of a cosmic war. He'd never asked for any of this. And yet now he was tied to the most powerful being in the galaxy, bound by a child they would create together. The sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Zorathar stood at the door, her expression unreadable as always. "It's time," she said simply. Alex stood, his heart racing. "Time for what?" "The Trial of Unity," she answered, her tone sharp, yet tinged with something softer. "The ceremony will determine if our bond is truly strong enough to unlock the potential within our child. The future of the galaxy rests on it." He felt his stomach churn. "What happens if we fail?" Zorathar's eyes darkened. "We won't fail," she said firmly, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her voice that Alex hadn't expected. "If the trial does not succeed, the child will never be born, and my people will remain trapped in this endless cycle of war." Alex swallowed hard. The pressure was suffocating. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival now. He was fighting for the survival of an entire galaxy. The gravity of it all weighed on him, and yet there was no turning back. The Trial of Unity was their last chance. As Zorathar led him through the corridors of the palace, Alex couldn't help but feel like a pawn in a game much larger than himself. His thoughts raced. What would the trial entail? How could they possibly prove their bond was strong enough to change the fate of entire worlds? They reached a large ornate room at the heart of the palace. The chamber was bathed in a dim, ethereal light, the walls covered in ancient symbols Alex didn't understand. At the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, and on it rested a shimmering crystal that pulsed with a soft, blue light. "This," Zorathar said, "is the Heartstone. It holds the power to determine if we are truly united in our mission. Our child's destiny lies within it. We must both place our hands on the crystal, and the Heartstone will reveal whether our bond is strong enough." Alex stared at the crystal, the sense of awe and fear building within him. He was about to take a step that could change everything. Zorethra placed her hand on the pedestal, looking at him with eyes full of expectation. "Are you ready?" Alex nodded, his palms sweating. He didn't know if he was ready, but he knew there was no other choice. Taking a deep breath, Alex stepped forward and placed his hand next to hers on the heartstone. The moment his skin touched the crystal, a surge of energy rushed through his body. The air around them hummed with power, and for a moment, Alex felt like his very soul was being pulled into another dimension. The crystal glowed brighter, and Zorethra's eyes widened. "It's starting," she whispered. Suddenly, a powerful force pushed against them, and Alex stumbled back. He could feel the bond between him and Zorethra tightening, strengthening, as if the crystal was testing them, measuring the depth of their connection. But as the energy pulsed through him, Alex felt something else. A dark, terrifying force pressing in on him, threatening to tear him apart. It was as though the galaxy itself was watching, waiting for them to fail. "Hold on." Zorethra's voice cut through the chaos, and Alex grasped her hand tightly. Together, they fought against the invisible pressure, their bond burning brighter, stronger. The trial was more than just a test. It was a battle for their very lives. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the light from the crystal exploded in a burst of energy. The pressure released, and Alex found himself gasping for breath. The trial was over. Zorethra looked at him, her face a mixture of relief and determination. "We've passed, but this is only the beginning. Our child will come, and with it, the future of everything we know will change." Alex's heart pounded as he realized the full weight of her words. There was no going back. Their bond was sealed. The future was now in their hands. And whatever came next, they would face it together. The aftermath of the trial of unity left Alex both exhausted and exhilarated. His body still hummed with the energy of the Heartstone, a reminder of how close he had come to losing everything. But the crystal had worked. Against all odds, he and Zorethra had passed. Their bond was now more than just words. It was a powerful, unbreakable force tied to the future of the galaxy itself. As the days passed, Alex found himself adjusting to a new reality. His relationship with Zorethra, once a strange, almost hostile connection, had slowly begun to change. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, an acknowledgement that they were both linked in ways they hadn't imagined. He was no longer just a human caught in the middle of an alien war. He was a partner in the Queen's destiny. Zorethra, too, had softened in her approach, no longer the cold, calculating ruler she had once been. The weight of her responsibility had not disappeared, but the connection between them had brought a sense of mutual respect and trust. Still, there were moments when Alex saw the flicker of worry in her eyes, when she looked out across her empire, troubled by the challenges that lay ahead. "We have passed the trial, but our journey is far from over," Zorethra said one evening, as they stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. The stars above seemed closer than ever, like they were watching their every move. "The universe will not change easily. Our child is the key, but it will take time, effort, and unity from both our people to make that change." Alex nodded, his mind still trying to process all that had happened. "I get it," he said slowly. "But what exactly do we do now? What's next?" Zorethra turned to him, her gaze firm and resolute. "Now we must prepare. We must rally those who are willing to stand with us. The forces that oppose us will not stop, not just because we have a child. There are those who fear what our union represents, those who will do anything to stop it." Alex frowned. "So there are enemies, other factions that want to keep things the way they are." Zorethra's expression darkened. "Yes, some believe that peace is impossible. They think the galaxy must remain divided, constantly at war, for order to be maintained. They will not take kindly to the idea of a child born of two worlds, one human, one alien, being the key to ending their power." A shiver ran down Alex's spine. It wasn't just about Zorethra and him anymore. The survival of their child and their peoples was at stake. There were enemies everywhere, both within and outside their ranks. "We'll need allies," Alex said, his mind racing. "Who can we trust?" Zorethra's eyes met his with determination. "There are some, those who believe in the future we are trying to create. They will help us, but we must act quickly before our enemies make their move." The weight of their mission seemed heavier now than ever before. Alex wasn't sure if he was ready for what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. He had no choice. Zorethra was right. This wasn't just about them. It was about the future of an entire galaxy. As the sun set on the alien world, Alex and Zorethra stood side by side, their fates intertwined. They had already crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. Whatever came next, they would face it together, united by the promise of a child who could change everything. But deep down, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was only just beginning. The forces they had to face were far more powerful and dangerous than they could imagine. And yet, for the first time since arriving on this alien planet, he felt a spark of hope. Together, they might just be able to make the impossible possible. But as the first stars began to appear in the night sky, Alex couldn't help but wonder, would their bond be enough to withstand the storm that was coming? The days that followed were filled with uncertainty and preparation. Zorethra and Alex spent most of their time in strategy meetings, gathering support from the factions who were willing to trust them. The Queen's inner circle had grown, but not without resistance. There were many who still questioned their alliance, their unity, and the future of a child born of two different worlds. Alex knew that the journey ahead wasn't going to be easy. The forces against them were powerful, ancient, and ruthless. They had enemies within the Queen's own empire and beyond, in the far reaches of the galaxy. Still, with each passing day, the bond between him and Zorethra grew stronger, and the stakes became even higher. The most pressing concern, however, was the silence from the alien factions that had opposed them from the beginning. Alex had expected an immediate backlash, a show of force to oppose their union, but instead, it was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Zorethra had tried to reassure him, but Alex could feel the tension in the air. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something darker and more dangerous than they were prepared for. One evening, after a long day of talks, Alex stood by a balcony in the palace, staring at the stars. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He had been thrust into this chaotic situation with no warning, no preparation, and yet somehow he had become a key player in a galactic game of power, and his future, along with Zorethra's and their child's, was hanging in the balance. "Alex," a voice called out from behind him. Zorethra stepped onto the balcony, her presence as commanding as ever. But tonight, there was something in her eyes, something that betrayed her usual stoicism. "We have received word from the farthest reaches of the galaxy." Alex turned, meeting her gaze. "What kind of word?" "There is a force gathering," she said, her voice low. "A group of factions who do not want this change. They do not want the child to be born, and they will do everything in their power to stop us." The chill of her words cut through him like ice. "Who are they?" Zorethra's expression hardened. "They are the Tormax, a ruthless alliance of warlords who control much of the galaxy's underworld. They believe in maintaining the status quo, in ensuring that power remains in the hands of the strongest, and they will stop at nothing to see that the prophecy fails." Alex felt his pulse quicken. He'd heard of the Tormax before, rumors of their violent conquests, their thirst for control. They were merciless, and they had no qualms about destroying anyone who stood in their way. "So, what do we do now?" Alex asked, his voice steady, though his mind raced. "We fight," Zorethra replied without hesitation. "But we do so carefully. We can't afford to lose the element of surprise. If the Tormax know we are ready for them, they will strike first." Zorethra's face grew darker. "We need to assemble our forces, rally those who are loyal to the cause. It's time to bring this war to the very doorstep of our enemies. They won't back down, and neither will we. Alex took a deep breath. There was no going back now. Their child, his child, was the key to the galaxy's future. And there were those who would kill to ensure that future never came to pass. The thought of the Tormax, ruthless and unrelenting, made his blood run cold. As they made their way back to the heart of the palace, Zorathra's mind was already working, planning their next move. But Alex's thoughts lingered on something deeper, something he couldn't quite shake. He had agreed to this fight, to the trials, to the union with Zorathra. But there was a fear gnawing at the back of his mind. What if they were wrong? What if the Tormax were right? What if they were bringing destruction instead of salvation? Zorathra turned to him as if sensing his thoughts. "I know what you're thinking, Alex," she said, her voice softer now. "But this is the only way. Our child is the key to ending the war. I know the risks and I know the dangers, but I also know that if we fail, nothing will ever change. My people will remain trapped in this endless cycle of violence, and the galaxy will burn." Alex met her gaze. There was no question in her eyes, only determination. Her confidence made him feel both reassured and fearful at the same time. She had a plan. She believed in their mission. But was it enough? The battle was coming, and soon they would be forced to face the Tormax and all those who would stand against them. Alex couldn't afford to second-guess himself now. He had a role to play, and he would have to play it, no matter the cost. "We'll make it through," he said, his voice steady. Zorathra nodded, her expression resolute. "We will. Together." As the two of them prepared for the coming storm, Alex realized that the fate of the galaxy, of the future itself, rested on their shoulders. And despite the uncertainty, despite the dangers ahead, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The war had arrived, and it came with a kind of ferocity Alex had never imagined. It wasn't the kind of war he had seen in movies or read about in books. This was real, raw, brutal, and all-encompassing. The Tormax forces were not just coming for them. They were coming for everything. Zorathra had wasted no time in assembling her forces. Loyal factions, old allies, and even some neutrals who saw the truth in her vision had rallied to her side. But it was clear, this would be no easy victory. The Tormax were ruthless, and their forces were vast. They had no mercy, and no hesitation when it came to striking down anything in their way. Alex had always considered himself a fighter, but nothing could have prepared him for the battles that were about to unfold. He had trained alongside Zorathra's elite guards, learning combat techniques and strategies that no human had ever needed to know before. Every night, he studied maps of the galaxy, planning the next move, trying to predict the Tormax's next strike. But even with all the preparation, nothing felt certain. One day, Zorathra called him into her war room. The walls were lined with holographic maps and images of different battlefronts. She was standing over a large, glowing map, her eyes focused and intense. "We've received intelligence," she said, her voice low. "The Tormax are planning a large-scale assault on the capital, our home base. They believe if they take the heart of our empire, they can cripple us permanently." Alex studied the map carefully. The Tormax were nothing if not calculated. Their strategy was clear: take the capital, kill the leadership, and dismantle any hope of uniting the galaxy. If they succeeded, it would mean the end of everything Zorathra had worked for. The end of their child's future. The end of the galaxy's future. "We can't let them succeed," Alex said, his voice firm. "No, we can't," Zorathra agreed, turning to him. Her eyes softened for a moment, but the weight of what was to come was heavy on both their shoulders. "But we have to be smart. We can't fight them head-on just yet. We need to outmaneuver them." Alex nodded, knowing she was right. This wasn't just about fighting. It was about strategy, thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead, anticipating the Tormax's moves before they made them. Zorathra turned back to the map, her fingers tracing the paths where their forces would strike. We'll take a few of their key outposts first, disrupt their supply lines, throw them off balance. Then we'll strike fast and hard when they least expect it. Alex's heart pounded. The plan was risky, but there was no other choice. Time was running out. The next several days were a blur of preparation, and soon, Alex found himself standing at the front lines, staring down the Tormax forces as they approached. His heart raced as he adjusted his armor, every part of his body on high alert. The battle was about to begin. Zorathra stood beside him, the weight of her responsibility clear in her posture. Her presence was commanding, and though she had seen countless battles, there was an unmistakable tension in the air. "We will win this, Alex," she said, her voice resolute. He wanted to believe her. He truly did. But the cold reality of the war was that no one could predict the outcome. They had planned and prepared as much as they could, but the Tormax were brutal, cunning, and unforgiving. The first wave of Tormax forces arrived without warning, their warships cutting through the atmosphere with terrifying speed. Explosions rocked the ground as missiles and energy blasts rained down. The battlefield turned into chaos. Screams, gunfire, and the whir of alien technology filled the air. Zorathra and Alex fought side by side, their movements in sync as they engaged the Tormax soldiers. Alex had never fought like this before, not for something so personal. Each swing of his sword, each strike against their enemies, felt like a blow for his future, for the life he now shared with Zorathra, for the child that would one day be born. But there was no time for sentiment. The war was everywhere, and the Tormax had no mercy. Suddenly, a loud explosion echoed from the left. Alex looked up, seeing a massive Tormax warship coming in for a direct assault. It was headed straight for the palace, the very heart of their forces. He felt a wave of panic hit him, but Zorathra's calm presence kept him grounded. "We have to take that ship down," she said, her voice steady. "Follow me." They ran toward a nearby battleground, where the enemy forces had gathered, heading straight for the massive cannons that were positioned to bring down the Tormax ship. The heat from the battle was intense, and the pressure was mounting with every second. The warship loomed closer, its massive cannons targeting the heart of the capital. Zorathra's eyes narrowed. It's now or never. Together, they joined the elite strike team, charging towards the Tormax vessel. There was no turning back now. The fate of the galaxy was in their hands. If they failed, everything would be lost. The battle reached its fever pitch, and with a single coordinated effort, they fired their weapons at the warship's weak points. The impact was immediate. Sparks flew, and the warship's engines exploded, sending it crashing down in a fiery explosion. Alex stood panting, his body aching. But as the smoke cleared, he saw Zorathra's face, the quiet satisfaction of a battle won. But the war wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Tormax were relentless, and they would keep coming. Zorathra turned to him, a fierce look in her eyes. "This is just the beginning. We've won a battle, but we have yet to win the war." Alex nodded, feeling the weight of her words. This was a fight for the future, for everything they had built together. And they weren't going to give up. Not now. Not ever. The war had stretched on for weeks, and though their victory in the previous battle had dealt a significant blow to the Tormax forces, the conflict was far from over. The Tormax were relentless, their thirst for power unyielding, and they would not stop until they had crushed Zorathra, Alex, and everything they stood for. As the days passed, the tension within the palace grew. Zorathra had gathered her most trusted allies, warriors, strategists, and diplomats alike. But even with the most skilled minds working together, the looming threat of the Tormax was impossible to ignore. Their forces were vast, and they had already regrouped, prepared for the next phase of their assault. Alex stood beside Zorathra on the balcony once more, looking out at the horizon. The stars in the distance felt colder now. The calm before the storm seemed to stretch on forever. His heart weighed heavily in his chest, knowing that soon They would face the final battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy and of their unborn child. Zorethra turned to him, her expression unreadable. The warrior queen he had once met was still there, but behind her fierce demeanor, Alex could see the toll the war had taken on her. It wasn't just her people she fought for now. It was the life they had created together. Their future, their child, was the spark of hope in an otherwise dark universe. "I wish I could say the worst is behind us," Zorethra said, her voice soft but steady. "But the Tormax will strike harder than before. This is their last chance to stop us. We cannot let them win." Alex nodded. "We won't, but we need to be ready. We need to hit them before they can prepare." Zorethra smiled faintly, but it was a smile filled with determination. "That's why I've called in reinforcements. The entire alliance is mobilizing. There are ships on their way, soldiers who will fight alongside us. Together, we will push back the Tormax forces." Alex's chest tightened with a mixture of hope and fear. The reality was that even with reinforcements, this would not be an easy victory. The Tormax had powerful weapons, brutal tactics, and no mercy. But Alex had come to understand something in these months of fighting. There was a strength in unity, a strength in standing together against impossible odds. As the evening wore on, Zorethra and Alex discussed their final strategy. The Tormax had assembled their largest fleet yet, and they would launch a full-scale attack on the capital under the cover of darkness. It was a gamble, but it was one that had to be made. They would strike the Tormax forces in a desperate attempt to break their will and cripple their ability to retaliate. The night of the final battle arrived. The stars above were clouded, as if even the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Alex stood with Zorethra at the front lines, watching the gathering storm of warships approaching. His heart raced. This was it, the culmination of everything they had fought for, and everything they stood to lose. "I'm with you," Alex said, his voice steady but tinged with the weight of everything that had led to this moment. "Let's end this." Zorethra turned to him, her eyes fierce. Together, the ground beneath their feet trembled as the Tormax warships fired upon the capital. Explosions ripped through the atmosphere, and a battle cry echoed across the galaxy. Alex and Zorethra charged into the fray, side by side, as the Alliance forces clashed with the Tormax in a violent storm of laser fire, explosions, and screams. The entire city seemed to shake under the intensity of the conflict. In the heart of the battle, the two armies met. Alex fought with everything he had, his skills honed by months of combat. Zorethra fought with the fury of a queen defending her people. The Tormax were relentless, but the unity of their forces, human and alien, made them unstoppable. As the battle raged on, Alex found himself face to face with a Tormax general, one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy. The Tormax's eyes were cold, calculating, and filled with hatred as he swung his weapon toward Alex. The two clashed in a brutal fight, each blow carrying the weight of the entire war. Alex's breath came in ragged gasps as he parried and struck, his mind flashing back to everything that had led to this moment. He was fighting for more than just his life. He was fighting for Zorethra, for their child, for a future that no one had believed possible. With a final, decisive strike, Alex brought the Tormax general to his knees. The roar of battle around him seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was waiting for what would come next. "Victory is ours," Zorethra's voice rang out, clear and strong, cutting through the chaos. And in that moment, the Tormax forces began to retreat. Their general had fallen, their morale shattered. Zorethra's forces had claimed the day. The war was over. The Tormax were defeated, and the galaxy began to heal. The rebellion was quelled, and peace was once again within reach. The cost had been high, but Zorethra, Alex, and their unborn child had won. Together, they had rewritten the future. As the dust settled, and the warships returned to their respective systems, Zorethra and Alex stood together, looking at the horizon once more. The battle was over, but their journey had just begun. "Our child will bring change," Zorathra whispered, her hand gently resting on her belly. "A new future, a new hope for everyone." Alex smiled, his heart full as he took her hand. Yes, a future we can all share. And so, together, they stepped into that future, side by side. No longer just a human and an alien queen, but a family destined to shake the galaxy and create a world where peace could finally take root. The war was over, but their story, our story, was just beginning.